Hey guys, tonight we slip into a frozen world where the horizon looks endless and the cold feels personal, like it knows your name. You stand on a winter plain as dusk settles, the sky turning pale and metallic, your breath cracking the air into little white clouds that vanish almost as soon as they appear. The wind combs the snow flat, whispering over the ground, and you can already feel how quickly exposed skin starts to burn. This is the kind of cold that doesn't just make you uncomfortable, it makes you question every life choice that brought you here. You probably won't survive this without some serious tricks passed down over generations. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always wild to see where people are listening from while you're drifting off. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start moving, because standing still is a bad idea. Your boots crunch through snow that squeaks underfoot, that dry, brittle sound that only comes with deep cold. Somewhere ahead, a thin ribbon of smoke curls upward, bending sideways in the wind before dissolving into the darkening sky. That smoke is hope. It means people. It means shelter. And more importantly, it means you might actually sleep tonight instead of shivering yourself into exhaustion. As you walk, you realize just how exposed you are. There are no trees tall enough to block the wind, no hills to hide behind, just open land and a sky that feels much too big. This is where one mainstream historical fact becomes impossible to ignore. Many Native American nations lived through winters that were not just cold, but brutally unforgiving, long before modern fabrics, heaters, or insulated buildings existed. And yet, people didn't just pass through these places, they made homes here. Families raised children here. Elders grew old here. That fact alone should make you pause, because right now, with your modern imagination and imaginary jacket, you already feel underprepared. The smoke grows thicker as you approach, and shapes begin to emerge from the white landscape. Tall, conical silhouettes rise from the snow, clustered together instead of scattered. They look almost organic, like they grew out of the earth rather than being built on top of it. These are winter tents, lodges designed not for comfort as you understand it, but for survival. You feel the wind lessen slightly as you get closer, not because it's stopped, but because something is breaking its force. Here's a quirky little tidbit to tuck into your mind early. Some winter lodges were deliberately positioned so that drifting snow would pile up around their bases. That sounds backwards, right? Snow feels like the enemy, but packed snow traps air, and trapped air insulates. The same substance trying to freeze you solid is quietly being recruited to keep you alive. Historians still argue whether this was always intentional design or a clever adaptation people noticed and then leaned into over time. Either way, the result was the same. You let winter help you fight winter. You slow your pace as you reach the edge of the encampment. Dogs dart between the structures, their coats thick and frost-dusted, clearly unfazed by conditions that have your jaw clenched tight. Somewhere, you hear the muffled sound of laughter, low voices carried through hide walls, and the steady crackle of fire. That sound does something to you. It loosens your shoulders just a little. Fire means warmth, yes, but it also means dryness, food, light, and life. You stop for a moment and take it all in. The lodges aren't random. They're arranged with care, openings angled away from the strongest wind, walls close enough to shield one another. This isn't accidental. This is architecture shaped by memory, by stories that start with the last time winter came early and end with so we never did that again. Knowledge here isn't written down. It's lived, repeated, and remembered. As you approach one lodge, the smell hits you first: wood smoke, animal hide, something faintly earthy and warm beneath it all. It clings to everything, including you, and once it's there, it doesn't really leave. You'll carry it in your hair, your clothes, your dreams. You duck slightly and step through the entrance, and the world changes immediately. The wind drops away like someone closed a door on it. The cold doesn't vanish, but it softens, pulled back from sharp pain to dull presence. Inside, it's dim. Firelight flickers at the center, throwing long shadows that dance across the curved walls. The air is smoky, yes, and your eyes sting for a second, but your skin registers something far more important: heat, real heat. Not the kind that makes you sweat, but the kind that lets your muscles unclench for the first time in hours. You didn't realize how tense you were until this moment. Another mainstream fact settles in here. Winter tents were not flimsy shelters. They were carefully engineered systems made from wood, hide, fire, and airflow, refined over generations. Buffalo hides, deer skins, or other animal coverings were layered, stitched, and stretched tight to block wind while still allowing the structure to breathe. Too tight, and smoke chokes you. Too loose, and cold air slices in. Balance is everything. You notice how the ground beneath you isn't bare. Furs, mats, grasses, layers separating feet and bodies from frozen earth. Cold doesn't just come from the air. It rises up from the ground, stealing heat relentlessly. Whoever built this lodge understood that deeply. And they built accordingly. Someone near the fire pokes the embers, and sparks jump upward, briefly illuminating faces, tired, calm, unbothered. This is just another winter night to them. To you, it feels like an achievement just to be standing here with all your fingers still cooperating. Joke number one, nice and gentle. You've been inside for about 30 seconds and already want to write a heartfelt thank you letter to whoever invented fire. You ease down near the edge of the lodge, careful not to crowd anyone, and let your breathing slow. The wind outside still howls, but it sounds far away now, like a story someone else is telling. You think about how many winters this exact setup has endured, how many nights like this one have passed with people sleeping, dreaming, surviving. Historians still argue whether the warmth of these winter tents came more from their clever design or from the communal living inside them. Was it architecture that saved lives, or the simple physics of many bodies sharing heat in a confined space? As you sit there, watching the fire pulse gently, you suspect the answer is both. Survival rarely hinges on just one thing. It's layers, always layers. You pull whatever covering is offered closer around your shoulders and let the fire do its quiet work. Outside, the cold remains absolute and indifferent. Inside, there is warmth, sound, and the promise of rest. And for the first time since you stepped onto that frozen plain, you believe you might actually sleep tonight. You stay low as you move back outside, the cold immediately reminding you it never truly left. It was just waiting politely. The wind grabs at your clothes again, but something feels different now. You're no longer wandering blindly across open land. You're inside a system. From the edge of the encampment, you can finally see it clearly. The lodges form a deliberate circle, each one angled just slightly, like shoulders hunched together against a shared enemy. This isn't coincidence. This is winter strategy made visible. You step slowly around the perimeter, boots crunching through packed snow, and notice how the worst of the wind slides around the village instead of cutting straight through it. The circle breaks its force, turning a brutal, constant assault into something dulled and scattered. One mainstream historical fact settles in here. Many Native American winter camps were intentionally arranged in circular or oval formations, not only for social and spiritual reasons, but because the shape reduced wind exposure and conserved heat. Wind loses strength when it can't find a straight path, and these people knew that long before anyone put it in a textbook. You pause, facing into the gale for a moment, just to test it. The difference is obvious. Outside the ring, the wind presses hard enough to make you lean into it. Inside, it still moves, but it no longer feels like it's trying to peel your skin away. It's the difference between being shouted at and being firmly warned. Joke number one. Turns out winter, like bad opinions online, is much easier to handle when it can't come at you head on. The lodges themselves add to the effect. Each one blocks the next, overlapping protection like shields in a defensive line. Snow drifts pile higher on the outer edge of the circle, forming soft, white walls that absorb sound and trap air. Inside the circle, the snow is trampled down, darkened by ash and foot traffic, evidence of constant movement and life. This isn't just a place to sleep, it's a living organism, adapting hour by hour. Here's a quirky tidbit you wouldn't expect. In some winter camps, people intentionally allowed snow to drift higher on the windward side of the village, while keeping the leeward side clearer for movement. Snow wasn't just tolerated, it was managed. Like livestock that didn't listen very well. Historians still argue whether this was a conscious engineering choice or a pattern recognized and reused after years of observation. Either way, winter villages often looked half-buried by design, not neglect. You walk further into the circle now, and the sound changes. The wind becomes a low, steady hum instead of a shriek. Voices carry more clearly, fires crackle, dogs bark once or twice, then settle. Even the sky feels different overhead, as if the circle itself has claimed a small piece of calm from the night. You realize how important this is psychologically. Cold doesn't just attack the body, it grinds down the mind. Breaking the wind breaks that pressure too. People move with confidence here. No one rushes, no one panics. Children dart between lodges, bundled in furs that make them look like walking pillows. An elder steps slowly, deliberately, as if every motion has been tested and approved by decades of winters, just like this one. You feel clumsy by comparison, painfully aware of how new you are to this environment. Another mainstream fact surfaces as you watch. Winter camps were often placed near natural windbreaks when possible, low hills, riverbanks, stands of trees, but the circular layout remained crucial even when geography helped. Nature was an ally, but never fully trusted. Design filled in the gaps. You notice the entrances now. None of them face directly into the strongest wind. Each opening is offset, angled just enough that gusts glance past instead of charging straight in. That means less snow blowing inside, less heat escaping, and fewer nights waking up with frozen eyelashes. Joke number two. It's the ancient version of not putting your bed directly under the air conditioner. As you pass one lodge, a flap lifts briefly, releasing a puff of warm, smoky air that immediately vanishes into the night. That warmth doesn't just disappear uselessly, It contributes to the microclimate inside the circle, slightly raising the temperature of the shared space. It's subtle, but over hours and days, it matters. Survival here isn't about dramatic solutions. It's about stacking small advantages until winter runs out of options. Historians still argue whether the social importance of circles came before their practical benefits, or the other way around. Did spiritual beliefs about unity and protection lead to better winter survival, or did effective survival strategies later take on symbolic meaning? Standing here, you suspect the answer doesn't really matter. When something works, people remember it, ritualize it, and pass it on. You stop near the center of the village and turn slowly, taking it all in. Fires glow in multiple lodges, their light flickering through thin seams and smoke holes. The circle feels held together, intentional, calm. Outside this ring, the plains stretch endlessly, indifferent and lethal. Inside, there is pattern, memory, and warmth earned through experience. You exhale, shoulders dropping as your body finally accepts that for now, you're safe. The night is still cold, winter hasn't softened, but it's been outmaneuvered, at least for this small patch of ground. And as you turn back toward the lodge you'll sleep in, you understand something important. Before you even lie down, before furs and fire and shared heat, survival here begins with where and how you stand together against the wind. You duck back toward one of the lodges, instinctively lowering your head as if the wind might still try to grab you by the collar. The entrance looks small, almost unwelcoming, but that's intentional. Heat loves to escape upward, and wide openings are invitations for cold to rush in. You push the flap aside and step through, and once again the world compresses around you in the best possible way. Inside, the lodge feels quieter than it did before. Not silent, just softened. The wind is gone, replaced by the low murmur of voices and the steady, reassuring crackle of the fire. The air is thick with smoke, yes, and your eyes sting for a moment, but your skin immediately notices the difference. The sharp edge of cold dulls. Your fingers tingle as blood flow returns, that almost painful warmth that reminds you how close you were to numbness outside. You pause just inside the entrance, letting your senses adjust. The fire sits at the center, modest but constant, its flames licking upward and sending smoke toward a small opening above. The walls curve inward, layered hides stitched together so tightly they look like muscle pulled over bone. This isn't a tent in the modern sense. It's a shell, a living barrier. A mainstream historical fact anchors itself here. Winter lodges were designed to balance three things at once: warmth, airflow, and dryness. Too much smoke, and people suffocated. Too much airflow, and the cold reclaimed everything. The solution wasn't perfection, but control. Controlled discomfort in exchange for survival. You move closer to the fire and feel the heat on your shins, uneven but welcome. The ground beneath you is covered furs, woven mats, dried grasses, anything to keep bodies from touching frozen earth. Cold radiates upward relentlessly, and whoever built this place understood that lying directly on the ground was an invitation to lose heat fast. Joke number one. Turns out the floor is lava wasn't just a game, it was winter advice. You settle down near the edge of the lodge, careful to mirror how others position themselves. Nobody sprawls. Space is used efficiently, bodies angled toward the fire, backs turned slightly to the walls. Children are tucked inward, elders sit where the heat is most consistent. Nothing here is random. The smoke curls upward in slow spirals, and you follow it with your eyes. It stings, but it also dries the air, pulling moisture out of hides and bedding. Moisture is dangerous in winter. Wet materials steal heat faster than dry ones, and frost forms quickly when damp meets cold. The fire isn't just warmth, it's a defense against rot, mold, and freezing condensation. Here's a quirky tidbit that feels almost counterintuitive. Early European visitors often complained that these lodges were unbearable because of the smoke, while the people who lived in them seemed barely bothered. Some scholars think generations raised around constant smoke simply adapted, tougher lungs, different tolerances. Others argue that the smoke holes were far more effective than outsiders realized, adjusted constantly depending on wind direction. Historians still argue whether the discomfort described in journals reflects poor design or unfamiliarity from visitors expecting chimney-level ventilation. Either way, you realize something important. You're the fragile one here. As your eyes adjust, details emerge, tools hang from poles, clothing dries near the fire. Food simmers quietly, sending out a low, savory smell that mixes with smoke and hide. This is warmth with purpose. Nothing decorative, nothing wasted. You shift slightly, and the sound of movement is muted by layers beneath you. Even noise is managed here. Loud sounds mean energy, disruption, stress. Quiet means rest. The lodge absorbs sound the way it absorbs wind, turning chaos into something manageable. You think back to the open plain, to how exposed you felt under that massive sky. Inside the lodge, the ceiling feels low, but comforting, like being wrapped in something protective. The curved shape helps too. There are no corners for cold air to settle into, no sharp angles where drafts can gather strength. Cold slides along the walls instead of pooling. Another mainstream fact slips in. Many winter lodges were semi-permanent, used season after season, repaired and reinforced as needed. These weren't disposable shelters, they were investments, maintained with care because lives depended on them. You watch someone add a small piece of wood to the fire. Not too much, just enough. Big fires waste fuel and create too much smoke. Small, steady flames last longer and keep temperatures stable. Survival here isn't dramatic, it's patient. Joke number 2, barely there. You suddenly understand why cozy doesn't mean Instagram aesthetic when freezing to death is the alternative. Historians still argue whether the true magic of these lodges was architectural or social. Was it the structure that made winter livable, or the shared knowledge of how to use it correctly? Sitting here, you suspect it's the combination that matters. A perfectly built lodge means nothing if you misuse the fire, ignore airflow, or isolate yourself. You lean back slightly, letting the warmth reach your spine, and feel your breathing slow. Outside, winter continues exactly as it always has, cold, relentless, uninterested in your comfort. Inside, though, the lodge holds steady. It doesn't defeat winter, it negotiates with it. And as the fire settles into a gentle rhythm, you realize this is only the beginning. Shelter got you out of the wind. Design softened the cold. But sleeping through the night, that will require even more layers of knowledge, patience, and shared warmth. You shift closer to the curved wall of the lodge, close enough now to really study it, and what you see isn't crude or temporary, it's deliberate. Layered buffalo hides overlap like scales, each one stitched tight with sinew that's been pulled and dried until it's stronger than it looks. The seams matter. They're angled so wind slides past instead of forcing its way in, and where one hide ends, another begins just slightly over it, denying the cold any clean entry point. This is where a mainstream historical fact becomes unmistakable. Buffalo hide was one of the most effective insulating materials available on the plains. Thick, dense, and naturally wind-resistant, it outperformed early European canvas by a wide margin. Later settlers learned this the hard way when their tents failed catastrophically in winter storms while indigenous lodges held firm. What looks primitive from the outside is, in reality, field-tested technology refined across centuries. You reach out and lightly press your palm against the inside of the wall. The hide is cool, not icy, which tells you everything you need to know. Cold is being slowed here, not invited in. The wall flexes faintly with the wind, absorbing force rather than resisting it outright. Stone walls fight the cold and lose. Hide walls give just enough to survive. A subtle smell lingers in the air near the wall, earthy, animal, smoky. It's the scent of tanned hide, worked with fat and brains, softened by hands that knew exactly how much was enough. Here's a quirky tidbit you probably wouldn't guess. Some families intentionally left parts of the hide slightly rougher on the outside during winter, believing the uneven surface disrupted wind flow and reduced heat loss. Whether that belief was scientifically sound or simply inherited wisdom, historians still argue. But the practice existed, and it worked well enough to persist. You notice repairs too, small patches stitched in, newer pieces sewn alongside older, darker hides. These lodges weren't built once and abandoned. They were maintained like living things. When a seam weakened, it was fixed. When a hide thinned, it was replaced. Winter punished neglect quickly, so care became habit. The walls aren't just insulation, they're memory. Each hide represents a hunt, a success, a shared effort. Sleeping inside this structure means being surrounded by stories of survival layered literally around you. That knowledge settles in your chest in a way that's oddly comforting. Joke number one, soft and sleepy. Suddenly, open concept living feels like a deeply unserious idea. The height of the lodge matters too. Heat rises, and the conical shape encourages smoke and excess heat to move upward, while keeping the lower space where people sit and sleep warm but breathable. Too low, and smoke chokes you. Too high, and heat escapes too quickly. Balance again, always balance. You watch the firelight dance across the seams, and you realize how little light escapes outward. At night, this lodge wouldn't glow like a beacon. It would appear dark, low, almost invisible against the snow. That mattered too. Warmth without exposure, safety without advertisement. Another mainstream fact settles in quietly. Women were often the primary builders and maintainers of these hide structures. Their expertise wasn't decorative or secondary, it was critical infrastructure. Without properly prepared hides, winter camps failed, full stop. Survival depended on skills passed from mother to daughter, aunt to niece, generation to generation. Historians still argue about just how airtight these lodges really were. Some claim they were drafty by necessity, constantly leaking air through seams and smoke holes. Others argue that when properly maintained, they were remarkably efficient, especially when combined with fire and communal sleeping. Sitting here, with your breath no longer fogging aggressively, you lean toward the second camp. Joke number two. You've been indoors long enough that you're starting to judge modern housing choices. You slide back to your place near the fire, but now you carry a new awareness. These walls aren't passive. They're doing work every second, blocking wind, trapping warmth, flexing under pressure, and holding the line between life and lethal cold. Outside, winter waits patiently. Inside, the hides answer back, quiet but unyielding. You let your head rest against a rolled fur, eyes half closed, firelight pulsing gently. Shelter alone didn't make winter survivable. It was shelter built with knowledge, maintained with care, and trusted completely when the night grew long. And as the fire crackles low and steady, you realize the walls are only the first layer. Winter hasn't been beaten yet. It's only been slowed. You glance back toward the entrance, where the bottom edge of the lodge disappears into a thick, uneven ridge of snow. From the inside, it looks almost accidental, like winter simply piled itself up and forgot to leave. But the longer you watch, the clearer it becomes that no one is rushing to remove it. In fact, someone earlier even nudged loose snow closer to the wall with a boot. That's when it clicks. This isn't neglect. This is insulation. Here's a mainstream historical fact that feels backwards until you sit with it. Packed snow is an excellent insulator. It traps air in tiny pockets, slowing heat loss far more effectively than bare ground or exposed walls. Many Native American winter camps allowed snow to bank naturally against lodges, especially on the windward side, because those drifts acted like a thick, protective blanket. Cold outside, warmth inside, and snow quietly doing the heavy lifting. You lean closer to the wall near the floor and feel it. The air there is still, no sharp drafts slicing across your ankles. Snow has sealed the weakest part of the structure, the base where wind loves to sneak in and steal heat. Instead of fighting winter by clearing everything away, people here let winter help them survive itself. A quirky little tidbit slips in here. Some oral traditions describe elders telling children not to kick away the snow piled against the lodge, no matter how tempting it looked. That snow is working, they'd say. Historians still argue whether this instruction was universal or more situational, but enough accounts repeat the idea that it clearly mattered. Snow wasn't always an enemy. Sometimes it was a wall you didn't have to build. You imagine how this looks from outside. The lodge half buried, edges softened by drifts, blending into the landscape. That had another advantage: camouflage. A snowbanked lodge was harder to spot from a distance, especially at night. Warmth without visibility, comfort without calling attention to yourself. Winter survival doubled as winter stealth. You settle back down and pull a fur tighter around your legs. The fire pops quietly, sending a brief spark upward, and you notice how the snow dampens sound too. The wind outside is still there, you know that, but it's been muted, filtered through layers of hide, air, and packed ice. The lodge feels wrapped, like it's wearing a coat of its own. Joke number one, drifting in gently. Turns out snow removal is a very modern anxiety. Historians still argue whether winter camps were deliberately placed in locations where snow drifted predictably near riverbanks, low ridges, or natural breaks, or whether people simply adapted wherever they landed. Archaeological evidence isn't always clear. Snow melts, wind erases patterns, but the consistent presence of snowbank structures across regions suggests this wasn't pure accident. You think about how counterintuitive this would feel at first. Everything in your instinct says clear space, get rid of the cold thing. But winter doesn't play by instinct, it plays by physics. Packed snow holds warmth. Loose snow blows away. The people who survived learned the difference, sometimes the hard way. Someone near the entrance adjusts a hide flap slightly, making sure it overlaps the snow ridge instead of lifting above it. Even the doorway works with the drift, not against it. Cold air slides down and stays outside. Warm air stays put. It's quiet engineering, invisible, unless you know what you're looking for. Joke number 2. Suddenly, that time you panicked about snow touching your car feels dramatic. You let your eyes close for a moment and imagine the lodge from above. Fire glowing at the center, bodies arranged around it, walls layered with hide, snow pressed gently against the base like a patient guardian. Each element doing a small job that adds up to survival. No single trick saves you from winter, but together they make the night possible. Historians still debate how much warmer these snow-banked lodges actually were compared to those without drifts. Some argue the temperature difference was modest. Others insist those few degrees meant everything, especially over long nights. Sitting here, warm enough to relax but not warm enough to forget the cold exists, you understand why the argument matters. Comfort isn't the goal. Endurance is. You shift slightly, feeling the ground beneath you, stay mercifully still, and let the fire's warmth reach your feet. Outside, snow continues to fall, piling up quietly, doing its slow, patient work. Inside, you breathe easier, knowing winter is being held back not by force, but by understanding. You turn your attention back to the fire, because everything here eventually leads back to it. It's not large. It doesn't roar or throw sparks wildly into the air. Instead, it burns low and steady, like it knows its job and refuses to show off. This isn't a fire meant to impress anyone. It's a fire meant to last. You ease closer, extending your hands toward the heat, palms open, fingers relaxed. The warmth spreads unevenly at first, touching skin in patches, then slowly evening out as blood flow returns. That sensation alone tells you something important. Fire here isn't about blasting away the cold, it's about maintaining a livable balance. Too much heat wastes fuel, dries, hides too fast, and fills the lodge with smoke. Too little, and the night becomes dangerous. Here's a mainstream historical fact that grounds the moment. Central hearth fires were essential in winter lodges, serving multiple purposes at once: heating, cooking, drying clothing and hides, and controlling moisture. Unlike fireplaces in stone buildings, these fires were open and communal, shared by everyone inside. Their placement at the center wasn't symbolic alone. It allowed heat to radiate evenly and kept no one too far from warmth. You notice how carefully the fire is managed. Someone adds a piece of wood, but not a log, just a modest branch. Another person nudges embers inward, tightening the heat rather than expanding it. Fuel is precious in winter, especially on open plains where wood may need to be hauled from far away. Every stick burned has to earn its place. A quirky tidbit drifts in as you watch. Some winter fires were deliberately kept lower at night than during the day. Elders taught that a steady, smaller fire reduced the risk of sparks catching hides or bedding, while still keeping temperatures stable through shared body heat. Historians still argue whether this practice was universal or dependent on region and fuel availability, but the logic is clear. At night, safety outweighs brightness. You glance upward and follow the smoke as it curls toward the opening at the top of the lodge. It never fully clears. A faint haze always lingers. That haze dries the interior, protecting furs and hides from dampness that could freeze later. It also coats everything in soot over time: walls, tools, even people. Smoke is inconvenient, but moisture is deadly. Between the two, smoke wins. Joke number one, soft and slow. Suddenly, smoky ambience feels like a very small price to pay for having toes. The fire crackles gently, a sound that quickly becomes background noise. It's rhythmic, predictable, almost hypnotic. Your breathing syncs with it without you noticing. Fires like this aren't just physical heat sources, they're anchors. In long winter nights, when darkness stretches endlessly, the fire marks time. As long as it burns, the night is being managed. You watch someone stir a pot hanging just above the flames. Food simmers quietly, thick and heavy, releasing a savory smell that settles into the lodge like another layer of warmth. Eating before sleep matters too. A fed body generates more heat. Calories aren't comfort here, they're fuel. Another mainstream fact settles in. Winter diets were often intentionally high in fat and protein because the body needed that energy to stay warm through long, cold nights. Historians still argue about how much warmth these central fires actually provided compared to bedding and shared body heat. Some suggest the fire's main role was psychological and functional: light, dryness, cooking, while the real thermal protection came later when people lay down together. Others insist the fire was essential throughout the night, especially in extreme cold. Watching the careful attention given to the embers, you suspect no one here was willing to gamble on just one method. Joke number two. You've seen enough survival shows to know that trusting a single heat source is how episodes end early. The fire dips slightly as fuel burns down, and someone nearby adjusts it without comment. No one announces the action. No one thanks them. This is shared responsibility, not heroics. Fire duty rotates quietly, understood rather than assigned. Everyone knows that if the fire dies completely, restarting it in deep cold is harder, slower, and riskier. You feel your shoulders relax further as the warmth settles deeper into your muscles. The fire's light flickers across faces now half hidden by shadow. Some people talk softly, others say nothing at all. Silence isn't awkward here, it's restful. Outside, the wind presses on, unseen but relentless. Inside, the fire answers back, not loudly, not aggressively, but consistently. It doesn't defeat winter. It keeps it at bay, inch by inch, hour by hour. Historians still debate whether the true genius of winter survival lay in technology or in routine. Was it the tools themselves, fire, hide, snow, or the disciplined habits around them that made the difference? Sitting here, watching the fire tended with practiced restraint, you realize it's the habits that keep everything else working. You pull your covering closer, turn slightly toward the heat, and let the fire's steady presence do what it's always done. It warms, it dries, it reassures, and for now, that's enough to carry you deeper into the night. You tilt your head back again, eyes tracing the thin column of smoke as it drifts upward toward the opening at the peak of the lodge. The smoke hole is small, deliberate, and never fully open. It's adjusted constantly, nudged this way or that depending on how the wind behaves outside. Someone shifts it earlier, and you felt the air change almost immediately, less sting in your eyes, no sudden rush of cold across your back. That balance is everything. This is where another mainstream historical fact quietly asserts itself. Winter lodges relied on carefully controlled ventilation to survive. Smoke holes weren't afterthoughts. They were essential features that regulated air quality, heat retention, and even moisture. Without them, the lodge would fill with smoke. With them opened too wide, precious warmth would vanish into the night. Getting it right meant the difference between breathing comfortably and freezing slowly. You watch how no one sits directly beneath the opening. That space is left clear, a vertical channel where smoke and excess heat escape. The rest of the lodge stays warmer because of it. Hot air rises, smoke follows, and the lower living space remains comparatively stable. It's simple physics, but applied with experience rather than equations. A quirky tidbit slips into your thoughts. Some winter lodges used adjustable flaps or extra hide panels near the smoke hole that could be pulled tighter during storms. Elders taught children how to read the wind by feel, how smoke curled, how flames leaned, and adjust the opening accordingly. Historians still argue how widespread these adjustable systems were versus fixed openings, but repeated oral accounts suggest flexibility was common, especially in harsh climates. You notice the smell again. Smoke, yes, but not choking. It settles into your hair, your clothes, your skin, becoming part of you. Long term, this soot helped preserve hides by discouraging insects and mold. Smoke wasn't just tolerated, it was useful. The irritation in your eyes fades as they adapt, and your breathing slows. Joke number one, quiet and drowsy. Suddenly, open floor plan with poor ventilation feels like a personal attack. You shift your position slightly and feel no cold draft follow. That's intentional. The lodge's airflow is vertical, not horizontal. Cold air stays outside. Warm air cycles gently inside. It's not perfect, but it's controlled. And control is the real luxury here. Historians still argue whether smoke exposure posed long-term health risks for people living this way. Some point to respiratory strain, while others note that people adapted physiologically over generations. What's clear is that the immediate risk of freezing outweighed concerns about smoke irritation. In winter, survival choices are rarely comfortable ones. You watch a child near the fire rub their eyes, then settle back against a fur-covered support without complaint. This is normal. This is expected. Discomfort here is calibrated, never enough to threaten life, never absent enough to forget the cold outside exists. The fire shifts, sending a thicker plume of smoke upward, and someone subtly adjusts the opening again. No discussion, no fuss, just action. This lodge breathes like a living thing, responding to its environment minute by minute. Joke number two. You've lived in places where people argue over thermostat settings. This feels far more serious. You realize something else too. The smoke hole provides light during the day. A faint shaft of pale brightness spills down, marking time as the sun moves. At night, stars sometimes peek through when smoke thins. Even in winter, even in survival mode, the sky is never fully shut out. You pull your covering tighter, feeling the warmth hold steady. The lodge hums softly, fire crackling, hides shifting, breath moving in quiet rhythm. Outside, the wind tests every seam. Inside, airflow answers with calm precision. Historians still debate whether ventilation was the most misunderstood element of winter lodges by early outsiders. Many Europeans tried to copy the structures but failed because they misunderstood airflow, sealing tents too tightly or opening them too much. The result was either suffocation or freezing. Knowledge here wasn't obvious. It had to be taught. You let your eyes close briefly, reassured by the steady balance around you. Fire below, smoke above, warmth held in between. The lodge doesn't trap you. It manages you gently, patiently, through another stretch of winter night. You shift your weight and feel it immediately, this soft resistance beneath you that isn't earth at all. The ground hasn't disappeared, but you're no longer resting directly on it. There's a subtle lift, a gentle give, like a shallow hammock disguised as a floor. When you run your fingers along the edge, you find woven branches lashed together carefully, forming a low platform raised just enough to matter. This is one of those details that looks small but carries real weight. A mainstream historical fact settles in. Many Native American winter lodges used raised sleeping platforms or low cots made from willow, saplings, or flexible branches. The purpose was simple and critical. Cold seeps upward from frozen ground faster than it enters from the air, elevating the body even by a few inches, drastically reduced heat loss during long winter nights. You adjust yourself slightly, and the platform flexes with a faint creak like an old wooden floor acknowledging your presence. It's not uncomfortable. If anything, it feels deliberate, shaped by use. Layers of grasses, rush mats, and furs rest on top, creating a barrier between you and the cold earth below. The difference is immediate. Your hips and shoulders stay warm instead of slowly bleeding heat into the ground. A quirky tidbit drifts in as you settle. Some winter platforms were angled slightly higher at one end than the other. Elders claimed it helped blood circulation during sleep, keeping feet warmer through the night. Historians still argue whether this tilt had real physiological benefits or if it was simply a comfort preference passed down over time. Either way, enough people believed in it to keep doing it. You stretch your legs carefully, mindful of shared space. Nearby, someone shifts too, and the platform absorbs the movement without complaint. This is communal engineering, built to support multiple bodies, multiple winters, countless nights. It's not furniture as you know it, it's survival architecture. Joke number one, drifting lazily. Suddenly, sleeping directly on the floor feels like a wildly optimistic choice. You think about how easy it would be to underestimate this detail. Fire draws attention, hides impress visually. But this quiet lift off the ground might be one of the most important tricks in the entire lodge. Without it, all the warmth above you would still be stolen from below, hour by hour, until shivering became inevitable. Historians still debate how widespread raised platforms were across different regions and nations. Some evidence suggests they were common in colder climates and less so where winters were milder. Others argue that organic materials like wood and grass rarely survive archaeologically, making platforms seem rarer than they truly were. Sitting here, warm enough to relax, you suspect absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. You notice how children are placed closer to the center of the platform, where warmth is most stable. Elders rest near the fire-facing edge. Everyone has a place. No one argues about it. These arrangements weren't negotiated nightly. They were learned, remembered, and repeated. The fire crackles softly, and heat drifts across the lodge, settling on you from above while the platform blocks cold from below. You're suspended in a narrow band of comfort, balanced perfectly between two extremes. It's fragile, but it works. Joke number two. You've paid money for camping gear that performs significantly worse than this. You curl slightly onto your side, pulling a fur up around your shoulders. The platform creaks once, then stills. Your breathing slows. The lodge feels steadier now, less like a place you're visiting and more like a place you belong, at least for tonight. Historians still argue whether platforms were always rebuilt when camps moved or reused seasonally in the same location. Some winter sites show signs of repeated use, platforms repaired year after year. Others suggest portable designs dismantled and reassembled as families migrated. Either way, the knowledge traveled, even if the wood did not. You close your eyes for a moment, feeling warmth above, insulation below, and the gentle presence of others around you. This is how winter nights become survivable, not through one grand solution, but through a series of quiet, thoughtful lifts away from danger. And with that small elevation beneath you, sleep finally starts to feel possible. You pull the heavy covering up toward your chest, and the weight of it settles over you like a decision that's already been made. This isn't a blanket in the modern sense. It's a layered quilt of fur and hide, dense enough that you feel it before you feel warmth. Then, slowly, warmth arrives anyway, trapped in the pockets of air between pelts, held there by sheer mass and patience. A mainstream historical fact anchors this moment. Winter bedding in many Native American communities consisted of multiple animal hides, buffalo, deer, elk, bear, layered deliberately to trap heat. These weren't casual piles. They were arranged with the thickest pelts on the outside, softer furs closer to the body, mimicking what modern sleeping bags try to do with synthetic layers. The principle is the same. Trap air, keep it still, let your body do the rest. You shift slightly, and the fur responds with a low rustle, soft and muted. The texture against your skin is surprisingly gentle, worn smooth by use, carrying the faint scent of smoke and animal fat. That smell isn't unpleasant. It's grounding. It tells you these materials have done this job before many times. Here's a quirky tidbit that feels almost luxurious. Some groups added feathers to their bedding. Goose or duck down was stitched between layers of hide, creating lighter, softer quilts that still held heat remarkably well. Imagine lying beneath something that combines the weight of fur with the loft of feathers. Historians still argue how common this practice was, since feathers rarely survive archaeologically, but trade networks and oral histories suggest it happened more often than we can prove. You tuck the covering under your chin, instinctively sealing in warmth. The cold doesn't disappear, but it retreats, pushed back to the edges of your awareness. Your feet, which felt distant and uncooperative earlier, begin to warm. That's when you know the bedding is working. Heat loss slows. Your body stops fighting. Joke number one, barely a whisper. Suddenly, too heavy to move feels like a compliment. You glance around the lodge through half-lidded eyes. Others are doing the same, arranging furs, tucking edges, creating small, personal pockets of warmth within the shared space. No one sprawls. Excess movement lets cold air in. Efficiency rules even here. Historians still argue whether families had individual bedding or shared large communal coverings. Some accounts describe massive piles of hides pulled over entire groups, while others suggest each person or pair had their own. The truth likely varied by region, resources, and family size. Watching the subtle choreography around you, you sense flexibility rather than rigid rules. You adjust again, and the weight presses you gently into the raised platform beneath. That pressure is comforting, anchoring. Modern sleep research would later rediscover what people here already knew intuitively. Deep pressure calms the nervous system. Out here, that calm isn't a luxury. It's how you rest deeply enough to survive. Joke number two. You've tried weighted blankets that feel far less earned than this. The fire's warmth reaches you in waves, not constant but dependable. When a log shifts, heat surges briefly, then settles back. The bedding smooths out those fluctuations, holding on to warmth when the fire dips, releasing it slowly. It's thermal memory in fur form. You think about how much work went into this hunting, skinning, tanning, sewing. Each stitch is labor, each layer is effort stored for a night like this. Sleeping here means literally resting under months of preparation. Historians still debate how often bedding was refreshed or replaced. Some suggest furs were used until they fell apart, patched and repurposed endlessly. Others argue prized winter bedding was carefully maintained and stored when not in use. Either way, nothing here was disposable. Your breathing slows further. The lodge's sounds blur into a soft background hum: fire, wind, breath. The fur muffles everything, including your own thoughts. Cold is no longer an immediate concern. It's been reduced to a distant fact, acknowledged but managed. You sink deeper, eyes closing fully now, wrapped in warmth that doesn't fight winter loudly but outlasts it quietly. Beneath these layers of hide and feather, sleep finally begins to take hold. Just as your body starts to relax into the weight of the furs, you notice a different kind of warmth blooming near your feet. It isn't coming from the fire directly. It's steadier, quieter, like a memory of heat rather than the flame itself. When you shift slightly, careful not to disturb anyone, you realize there's something tucked beneath the bedding, a smooth, rounded stone, still holding the fire inside it. This brings in a mainstream historical fact that rarely gets enough attention. Many Native American winter camps used heated stones as portable heat sources during the night. Stones were placed near the fire until they absorbed enough warmth, then carefully wrapped in hide, cloth, or bark and slipped beneath bedding. Once there, they radiated heat slowly for hours, warming feet, easing stiff joints, and keeping frostbite at bay long after the flames died down. You imagine the process earlier in the evening. Someone selecting stones that wouldn't crack river rocks, dense and patient, shaped by water and time. Someone else nudging them closer to the embers, testing them with a stick, knowing exactly when they were hot enough and when they were too hot. This isn't guesswork. It's learned knowledge, passed hand to hand. Here's a quirky little detail that almost makes you smile. Some families treated these stones like companions. Oral traditions mention children naming them, pressing cold toes against their warmth, and whispering thanks before sleep. Historians still argue how widespread this practice was, but enough stories echo the same idea. You make peace with winter by finding comfort wherever you can, even in a rock. You stretch your feet slightly, feeling the warmth seep upward through layers of fur. It's gentle, not scorching, the kind of heat that convinces your muscles to let go. Modern people use hot water bottles for the same reason, but this feels more elemental. Fire, stone, body, no middleman. Joke number one, drifting lazily. Turns out the original heating pad didn't need electricity. You notice others doing the same thing. A stone near a child's side, another tucked close to an elder's knees. These stones are placed strategically, not randomly. Feet and joints suffer first in the cold, so that's where heat goes. Efficiency over indulgence, always. Historians still debate how common heated stones were in winter sleeping arrangements. Some argue they were used mainly during extreme cold snaps, or when fuel was abundant. Others believe they were a standard part of winter nights, especially in regions where firewood was scarce and heat had to be stretched as far as possible. Watching how naturally they're used here, you suspect they were more common than written records suggest. You inhale slowly, and the smell of warm stone, faintly mineral, faintly smoky, mixes with fur and fire. It's an oddly comforting scent, earthy and calm. The lodge feels steadier now, as if warmth has been distributed more evenly, less dependent on the fire's mood. Joke number 2. You've paid for spa treatments that didn't relax you this efficiently. The fire dips lower, embers glowing instead of flames. But the warmth doesn't vanish. It lingers in the stones, in the hides, in the bodies pressed together. This is how winter nights are stretched, by storing heat, sharing it, and releasing it slowly over time. You curl slightly on your side, drawing knees closer to your chest, instinctively conserving warmth. The heated stone follows the movement, still doing its quiet work. You feel sleep pulling you deeper now, heavier and slower. Historians still argue whether these heat-storing methods were more effective psychologically or physically. Did they actually raise body temperature significantly, or did they simply provide comfort that allowed people to rest more deeply? Lying here, muscles finely loose, you suspect the answer is both. Comfort keeps panic away. Rest keeps you alive. Your thoughts drift, slower now, softer around the edges. Outside, the wind continues its endless work, scraping across the plains, indifferent to human effort. Inside, stone holds fire, fur holds warmth, bodies hold each other, and in that layered stillness, with heat stored quietly beneath you, the night loosens its grip just enough for sleep to take you the rest of the way. As sleep pulls at you, you become aware of how close everyone is. Not uncomfortably close, intentionally close. Bodies are arranged like pieces in a puzzle, edges touching, warmth overlapping. An arm rests against your back. Someone's knee presses gently into the fur near your legs. At first, your modern instincts twitch, unused to this kind of proximity, but the cold corrects that quickly. Out here, space is a luxury no one can afford. A mainstream historical fact settles in with the weight of truth. Communal sleeping was one of the most effective survival strategies during winter. Human bodies generate heat continuously, and when several people sleep close together, that warmth creates a shared microclimate. In a lodge like this, body heat wasn't incidental, it was a core part of the heating system. You feel it working. The air between bodies is warmer than the air near the walls. Breathing becomes easier. Muscles loosen faster. The fire could fade to embers, but this shared warmth would linger, held in by hide, fur, and careful positioning. Here's a quirky tidbit that feels oddly tender. Some oral histories describe elders deliberately placing the smallest children between adults at night, joking that kids were little suns once they fell asleep. Historians still argue whether this phrasing was symbolic or practical, but the placement itself is well documented. Children lost heat faster. Adults acted as living insulation. Joke number 1, barely audible. Turns out personal space is seasonal. You adjust slightly, finding a position that works with everyone else rather than against them. No one complains. Everyone shifts together, unconsciously cooperating. This kind of coordination doesn't come from rules, it comes from repetition. Winter after winter, people learn exactly how close is close enough. You notice dogs curled near the edges of the group, pressed against legs and feet, their thick coats radiating warmth back into the circle. They're not just companions, they're heaters with heartbeats. Another mainstream fact slips in quietly. Animals were often brought inside winter lodges, both for protection and shared warmth. Heat flows both ways, and dogs benefited just as much as people did. Historians still debate how universal this practice was, especially with larger animals, but dogs appear again and again in winter accounts. Their presence wasn't sentimental, it was practical. Joke number two: you've never appreciated dogs' commitment to warmth distribution quite like this. Your breathing synchronizes with those around you. It's subtle but real. When one person exhales, another inhales. The rhythm spreads, smoothing the night. This shared cadence does something calming to your nervous system, telling it you're not alone, that someone will notice if something goes wrong. You feel the fire's warmth ebb and flow, but the temperature near your body stays steady. This is the genius of communal sleeping. It buffers change. It turns sharp drops into gentle slopes. Historians still argue whether communal sleeping was primarily a cultural norm or a response to environmental pressure. Did people value closeness first and survival second, or did survival force closeness that later became tradition? Lying here, warm enough to rest, you suspect the two became inseparable. Your thoughts slow further now, edges blurring. The lodge hums softly, breath, embers, hides, shifting faintly as the wind tests them. Cold still exists, but it's been pushed so far back it no longer commands your attention. Wrapped in fur, pressed gently between others, you let go of the last bits of tension. This is how winter is endured, not alone, not bravely, but together, quietly, sharing the simple heat of being alive. Just when you think the warmth has reached its limit, you feel another source settle in beside you, a steady, living heat that shifts and breathes. A dog curls closer to your legs, its body a dense coil of muscle and fur, radiating warmth like a small furnace that runs on loyalty and scraps. It sighs, deeply satisfied, and goes still, perfectly content with its place in the night. This brings in a mainstream historical fact that often surprises people. Animals, especially dogs, were frequently brought inside winter lodges. They weren't just companions or guards, they were sources of heat. Dogs slept near people, under bedding edges, or along the perimeter of sleeping groups, adding their body warmth to the shared pool that kept everyone alive through the coldest hours. You feel it immediately. The dog's warmth is different from human heat, denser, steadier, less prone to fluctuation. Where a person shifts and cools briefly, the animal remains constant, a quiet anchor against the cold creeping in from the edges of the lodge. You tuck your feet closer, instinctively, and the dog adjusts without complaint, as if this arrangement has been rehearsed 100 times before. Here's a quirky tidbit that makes you smile in the dark. Some oral traditions describe dogs being deliberately placed near entrances at night, not only as early warning systems, but because their warmth helped counteract drafts near the door. Historians still argue whether this was intentional placement or simply where dogs preferred to sleep, but either way, the result was the same extra heat where it was needed most. Joke number one: drifting softly. You've never respected a dog's work ethic quite like this. The animal's breathing syncs with the human rhythm around you, slow and deep. Its fur traps heat efficiently, and you realize that dogs evolved alongside people in cold environments for a reason. This partnership wasn't accidental. It was mutual survival, refined over generations. You notice another shape near the wall, perhaps a small livestock animal in certain cultures, or more commonly another dog tucked far enough from the fire to stay safe, close enough to avoid freezing. Not every group did this, and historians still debate how common it was to bring larger animals inside winter shelters. Space, safety, and hygiene all played roles. But when it happened, it was because the cold demanded it. Joke number two: winter really does turn everyone into roommates. You shift slightly, and the dog presses closer, redistributing warmth without waking. This isn't affection as you'd define it. It's instinct layered with familiarity. The animal knows where it belongs. You know it too. The combined heat of bodies, human and animal, creates a pocket of stability inside the lodge. Even as the fire dips lower, the temperature near you barely changes. This is thermal teamwork at its most basic. Historians still argue whether animals contributed significantly to overall warmth or simply enhanced comfort. Measurements are impossible now, but experiential accounts repeat the same idea. Nights felt longer and harsher without them. Comfort matters because comfort allows sleep. Sleep allows survival. Your thoughts soften, drifting in slow circles. The dog's steady presence grounds you, its warmth constant, its breathing a low rhythm against your legs. Outside, winter keeps testing the lodge. Inside, life answers back with shared heat, shared space, shared patience. You sink deeper into the furs, letting the animal's warmth blend with your own. In this quiet cooperation between species, another layer of winter defense locks into place, and the night grows just a little easier to endure. Even as you lie there, wrapped in furs and pressed close to warmth, you realize something else that would surprise a modern camper. No one here has changed into sleepwear. You're already wearing it. Layers stay on through the night, adjusted but never fully removed, because undressing in winter is a gamble no one takes lightly. A mainstream historical fact settles in quietly. Native American winter clothing doubled as sleepwear. People slept in softened hide leggings, shirts, robes, and caps made from fur or woven fibers, often the same garments worn during the day. Clothing wasn't separated into inside and outside categories the way it is now. It was insulation, and insulation stayed on as long as the cold did. We feel the logic immediately. Fabric and fur trap air just like bedding does. Removing layers would expose skin to cold pockets inside the lodge and force the body to spend precious energy reheating itself. Instead, people loosened belts, adjusted seams, and layered strategically, keeping warmth where it mattered most. Here's a quirky tidbit that feels oddly familiar. Many people slept wearing head coverings. Fur caps, hoods, or wrapped cloth stayed in place through the night because so much heat escapes through the head. Historians still argue whether this practice was universal or more common in extreme cold regions, but repeated accounts describe sleepers pulling caps down low, sometimes even over their ears and eyes, creating a cocoon of warmth and darkness. Joke number one: soft and slow. Suddenly, sleeping in socks feels less like a personality trait and more like wisdom. You adjust the fur near your neck and feel how it overlaps your clothing, sealing gaps where cold air might sneak in. No skin is exposed without reason. Ankles are wrapped. Wrists are covered. Even fingers are sometimes tucked into sleeves or mitts. This isn't about comfort, it's about heat retention, plain and simple. Historians still argue how often people changed or dried night clothing during extended winter storms. Some suggest garments were rotated and dried near the fire whenever possible. Others believe people simply endured dampness until weather allowed proper drying. Lying here, you understand the stakes. Wet clothing steals heat fast, but removing it risks even more. Joke number two: Modern laundry complaints suddenly feel extremely unserious. You notice how children are bundled more thoroughly than adults, extra layers tucked around small bodies, extra attention paid to hands and feet. Elders, too, are wrapped carefully, their joints protected, their heads covered. Clothing here reflects vulnerability as much as status. The fire shifts, embers glowing brighter for a moment, and warmth spreads across your layered body. Each layer slows heat loss just a little more. Hide over skin, fur over hide, bedding over all of it. Winter is being met with redundancy backup systems stacked on backup systems. You feel sleep pulling you deeper now, heavy and insistent. Your body no longer wastes energy shivering. Instead, it settles into maintenance mode, conserving heat, repairing muscle, restoring strength for morning. Historians still debate whether clothing contributed more to nighttime warmth than bedding or shared body heat. The answer likely depends on the night, the weather, and the individual. What's clear is that nothing here works alone. Every layer supports the next. You let your eyes close fully, head tucked, cap pulled low, breath warm against your cheek. The cold stays outside. Your clothing, like everything else in this lodge, does its quiet job without asking for credit. As the night deepens, you become more aware of how carefully everyone has been arranged. It isn't random, and it isn't based on comfort alone. There's a quiet logic guiding where each body rests, a pattern shaped by experience rather than preference. You notice that the smallest figures are nowhere near the edges. Children sleep closest to the center, where the fire's warmth is most stable and the air is least likely to chill. Elders, too, are positioned where heat lingers longest, never left to battle the cold alone. A mainstream historical fact settles into place here. Winter sleeping arrangements prioritized the most vulnerable. Infants, young children, and elders were intentionally placed in the warmest parts of the lodge, surrounded by adults who could share heat and respond quickly if something went wrong. This wasn't sentimentality. It was survival logic refined through generations of hard lessons. You shift slightly, careful not to disturb the balance, and feel how deliberate it all is. Bodies form layers stronger, larger adults toward the outer edges, smaller ones tucked safely inside. Heat radiates inward and outward at once, a human shield against the night. It's subtle, but effective. Here's a quirky tidbit whispered through oral tradition. Some elders claimed they could tell if a winter would be harsh based on how children slept. Restless nights early in the season were said to signal colder weeks ahead. Historians still argue whether this belief had any meteorological basis or was simply a comforting narrative. But it speaks to how closely people observed even the smallest changes during winter. Joke number one, gentle and sleepy. Turns out seating charts were once a matter of life and death. You notice an older woman near the fire, her breathing slow and even, wrapped in multiple layers of fur. Someone has positioned a heated stone near her feet, and another rests against her side, offering steady warmth. No one announces these gestures. They happen quietly, naturally, as if guided by an unspoken agreement. Historians still debate how much of this care was formalized versus instinctive. Were there explicit rules about who slept where, or did families simply learn through repetition what worked best? Lying here, you suspect rules weren't written because they didn't need to be. Winter enforced them swiftly enough. You feel the emotional warmth of it too. Protection here isn't abstract, it's physical. It's proximity. The knowledge that if someone stirs in distress, another body is already close enough to respond. This closeness doesn't just preserve heat, it preserves calm. Joke number two. Suddenly, being left out in the cold feels extremely literal. The fire crackles softly, casting light over sleeping faces, each one relaxed in the knowledge that they aren't facing the night alone. Outside, the wind tests the lodge again, pressing harder for a moment before sliding away. Inside, the arrangement holds. Historians still argue whether this prioritization of elders and children shaped broader social values or simply reflected them. Did winter survival reinforce respect for age and care for youth, or did those values already exist and find expression in winter routines? The answer blurs in the warmth of the lodge. You settle deeper into your place, feeling protected by both structure and people. The night continues, long and cold, but here, within this careful human geometry, winter has been given its boundaries. As your awareness drifts in and out, your attention is drawn to the smallest shape in the lodge, a bundle so still it almost looks like part of the bedding itself. An infant lies, secured in a cradle board, wrapped tightly in layers of fur and soft plant fibers, positioned close to warmth, but never directly against the fire. In a world this cold, a baby can't rely on movement or instinct. Everything about their survival has to be designed in advance. A mainstream historical fact settles gently. Cradle boards were essential tools for infant care during winter. Far from being rigid or uncomfortable, they were carefully engineered to keep babies warm, dry, and protected. Moss or dried plant material lined the inside, absorbing moisture and adding insulation, while furs wrapped around the outside sealed in heat. The board itself prevented dangerous heat loss by limiting exposed surface area. You watch as a parent adjusts the cradle slightly, angling it closer to shared warmth. The baby doesn't cry. It barely stirs. This setup is familiar, comforting, and safe. Cradle boards allowed adults to move, work, and sleep without constantly risking an infant's exposure to cold. At night, they became tiny winter shelters within the larger shelter. Here's a quirky tidbit that feels almost tender. Some oral traditions describe parents warming cradle boards near the fire before settling babies in for the night, careful never to overheat them. Others mention slipping a gently heated stone well wrapped near the foot of the board during extreme cold. Historians still argue how common this practice was, but enough accounts repeat it that you know it wasn't rare imagination. Joke number one, barely audible. Turns out baby-proofing once included don't freeze. You notice how the cradle is placed where multiple adults can feel it if the baby stirs. Not isolated, not ignored. Protection here is layered materials, placement, and proximity all working together. The baby is warm not because of one thing, but because of everything. Historians still debate whether infants slept in cradle boards all night or were sometimes removed to share direct body heat. Some argue boards limited flexibility and warmth sharing, while others insist the insulation was more reliable than skin-to-skin contact in deep cold. Watching the careful balance here, you suspect families adapted nightly, choosing what worked best for the conditions. You feel a strange calm settle in. If a society can keep its smallest members alive through winters like this, it understands survival at a deep level. This isn't improvisation, it's inherited wisdom. Joke number two, drifting softly. Modern parenting books would need an entirely different section for this climate. The fire flickers lower, embers glowing, and the lodge remains steady. The baby sleeps on, breath slow and even, wrapped in generations of knowledge disguised as fur and wood. Outside, winter continues its long vigil. Inside, life rests small, fragile, and protected. Sometime in the deep middle of the night, when dreams thin and the fire's glow dims to a quiet red, you notice movement. Someone slips carefully out from beneath the furs, moving slowly so the rest of the lodge can stay asleep. There's no groaning, no dramatic stretch, just a practiced rise, like this body has done this many times before. This is fire duty, and winter does not allow it to be forgotten. A mainstream historical fact settles in with the embers. Winter nights often required someone to tend the fire at intervals. Fires were rarely allowed to die completely because restarting one in extreme cold was difficult and dangerous. Instead, people took turns waking to feed embers, adjust airflow, and ensure the lodge stayed warm enough to make it to morning. You stay still, eyes half closed, watching through lashes as the person kneels near the hearth. They add a small piece of wood, not enough to flare, just enough to coax the embers back to life. Sparks rise briefly, then settle. The lodge exhales warmth again, gentle and controlled. Here's a quirky tidbit that feels almost intimate. In some communities, children begged to take part in night fire duty once they were old enough. It was seen as a mark of responsibility, proof that you could be trusted with the group's survival. Historians still argue how formal these rotations were, whether there were set schedules or flexible arrangements, but many accounts agree that tending the fire was a shared obligation, not a burden placed on one person alone. Joke number one: quiet and drowsy. Congratulations, you've unlocked the ancient version of the night shift. The fire tender pokes embers just enough to settle them, then glances upward, adjusting the smoke opening slightly as the wind shifts outside. The lodge responds immediately, less smoke, steadier warmth. This isn't guesswork, it's muscle memory. You feel the benefit without ever leaving your bedding. The cold that had begun creeping toward your toes retreats again. Your muscles relax further, reassured that someone is watching while you rest. This is one of the underrated luxuries of communal life, the ability to sleep deeply because responsibility is shared. Historians still debate how much warmth night fires truly added compared to stored heat in bedding and bodies. Some argue the fire's role was psychological, preventing panic and providing light. Others insist it was essential for survival during the coldest hours. Watching how carefully it's tended, you suspect no one here was willing to find out the hard way. Joke number two: turns out someone's got it, is the most comforting sentence winter can offer. The fire tender settles back into place after a while, sliding beneath furs again as quietly as they rose. Another body shifts slightly in response, sharing warmth automatically. The rhythm of sleep resumes, uninterrupted. Outside, the night presses on, relentless and cold. Inside, vigilance never fully stops. It just takes turns. You drift deeper now, soothed by the knowledge that even while you sleep, the lodge is being cared for. Embers watched, air adjusted, warmth protected. Winter is powerful, but attention is stronger. As the lodge settles again, the night grows quieter, deeper, the kind of silence that feels intentional rather than empty. In this stillness, warmth isn't just physical anymore. It's carried in words murmured before sleep, in habits repeated so often they become ritual. You feel it in the way the lodge seems to hold itself together, not just with hides and poles, but with belief. A mainstream historical fact comes softly into focus. Winter survival was shaped as much by spiritual practice as by material design. Stories, prayers, and rituals were woven into nightly routines, offering reassurance in a season where fear could be as dangerous as frost. These practices didn't replace practical knowledge, they reinforced it, steadying the mind so the body could rest. You hear a low voice near the fire, barely louder than the crackle of embers. It's not conversation. It's a story, half remembered, half recited, about ancestors who endured winters even harsher than this one. The cadence is slow, repetitive, almost hypnotic. Children have heard it 100 times, yet it still works. It reminds everyone that winter has been survived before. That matters more than optimism ever could. Here's a quirky tidbit that lingers in the dark. Some winter stories were told only at night, only during the cold months. They weren't entertainment. They were seasonal tools, meant to be heard when the wind howled and the lodge shook. Historians still argue whether these stories had practical survival content embedded in them, coded advice about behavior and caution, or whether their primary role was emotional resilience. Sitting here, you suspect they did both. Joke number one, gentle and sleepy. Turns out bedtime stories were once a critical piece of survival gear. You feel your breathing slow as the voice fades. The story doesn't end with triumph or victory. It ends with endurance, with morning coming, with people waking up. That's enough. In winter, survival doesn't need a dramatic finale. It just needs continuity. You think about how fear works in the cold. Panic tightens muscles, speeds breathing, burns energy. Calm conserves heat. These stories, these rituals, they manage fear the same way the lodge manages wind, by breaking its force and redirecting it until it loses power. Historians still debate how much belief itself contributed to physical survival. Did faith actually keep people warmer, or did it simply make hardship tolerable? Modern psychology would later argue that stress directly impacts physical resilience. Out here, that truth was lived long before it was studied. Joke number two. Apparently, mindfulness existed long before yoga mats. You notice small gestures too. Someone touches the cradle board lightly before sleep. Another presses a hand to the lodge wall, as if checking its strength. These actions aren't superstition. They're grounding. They remind people where they are, what protects them, and what they're part of. The fire glows low, steady, dependable. Outside, the wind eases for a moment, then returns. Inside, the lodge doesn't react. It has learned that winter comes and goes, but routine holds. You sink deeper into the furs, thoughts drifting like smoke toward the opening above. The stories fade, but their effect remains, wrapping around you like another layer. Warmth, structure, belief, each one doing quiet work in the dark. And as sleep pulls you under again, you realize surviving winter isn't just about staying alive. It's about staying calm enough to rest, night after night, until the cold finally loosens its grip. You wake without really waking, pulled up from sleep by a sound that doesn't belong inside the lodge. The wind has changed. It's louder now, sharper, scraping along the hides with more insistence than before. Snow rattles against the walls in quick bursts, like handfuls of dry grain being thrown again and again. This is one of those nights, the kind winter saves to remind everyone who's in charge. A mainstream historical fact settles in with the gusts. Blizzards and sudden storms were among the greatest dangers of winter life, even with well-built shelters. Wind could tear at seams, collapse poorly maintained structures, or smother fires if airflow wasn't managed carefully. Winter tents weren't passive refuges during storms. They required attention, adjustment, and sometimes urgent repair. You don't move much, but others do. Quietly, efficiently. Someone near the wall presses a hand against the hides, checking tension. Another tightens a cord, pulling the covering just a little closer to the poles. The lodge responds with a deeper, steadier hush as fewer drafts slip through. This is emergency management done in near silence. Here's a quirky tidbit that feels almost cinematic. Some winter camps kept spare hides or mats ready specifically for storm nights, stored, rolled, and within reach. When winds rose suddenly, these could be thrown over vulnerable sections of the lodge like extra armor. Historians still argue how common this practice was, since such materials rarely survive in the archaeological record. But oral histories repeat the image often enough that it's hard to dismiss. Joke number one, very quiet. This is definitely not the kind of weather app notification you want. The fire flares briefly as someone feeds it, then settles back down. Too much flame would pull air upward too fast, sucking cold in from below. Too little, and dampness would creep in. The person tending it knows exactly how much to give. This is not panic, this is response. You feel the lodge flex slightly as a strong gust hits, the hides bowing inward before easing back into place. Instead of cracking or resisting, the structure absorbs the force. It's unsettling, but also reassuring. Rigidity breaks. Flexibility survives. Historians still debate whether certain lodge designs performed better in extreme storms than others. Some argue that conical shapes shed wind more effectively, while others point out that low-profile winter lodges offered better resistance. What's clear is that people adapted designs to their environments, and those designs were tested relentlessly by weather like this. Joke number two, whispered somewhere in your thoughts. Suddenly, structural integrity feels very personal. The noise outside peaks, then steadies into a constant roar. Inside, the temperature drops just a little, noticeable but manageable. Bodies press closer together without discussion. Extra furs are pulled into place. A heated stone is nudged nearer to someone's feet. Small corrections layered on top of preparation. You realize that the calm you feel now isn't because the storm is harmless. It's because everyone here has done this before. Storms come, they test, they pass. The lodge has outlasted them. Historians still argue whether the greatest threat during winter storms was exposure or exhaustion. The cold itself kills, but so does the effort of fighting it too hard. Watching how energy is conserved, no wasted movement, no raised voices, you see the strategy clearly. Endure, don't battle. The wind howls on, but your breathing slows again. The lodge holds, the fire holds, the people hold. And somewhere in the noise, winter begins to lose interest, moving on in search of easier prey. Sometime later, how much later is hard to tell, you stir again, not from fear this time, but from a subtle change in the air. The wind has softened. The relentless pressure against the lodge eases into something more familiar, a steady background presence rather than a threat demanding attention. Your eyes open just enough to register the shift, and your body, still warm and heavy, relaxes further into the furs. A mainstream historical fact settles in with that calm. Winter sleep was often fragmented, shaped by storms, fire tending, and the simple rhythms of cold and warmth. People didn't expect 8 uninterrupted hours of rest. Instead, They slept in cycles, waking briefly and returning to sleep as conditions allowed. This pattern wasn't a failure of rest, it was an adaptation to winter reality. You become aware of small movements around you. Someone adjusts a covering. A dog lifts its head, sniffs the air, then settles again with a satisfied huff. The fire glows steadily now, embers banked just right, no longer needing constant attention. The lodge feels stable, almost content. Here's a quirky tidbit that feels oddly modern. Some oral traditions describe people waking briefly before dawn to eat a small bite of food during the coldest part of the night. A mouthful of dried meat or fat provided energy to generate heat before slipping back into sleep. Historians still argue how common this practice was, but the logic is sound. A fed body stays warmer than a hungry one. Joke number one, barely there. Apparently, midnight snacks once had a very serious purpose. You stretch just enough to test your limbs. They respond, warm and cooperative. No numbness, no sharp pain. That's a quiet victory. It means the night's defenses, fire, furs, bodies, stones, have done their work. Winter didn't get what it wanted. Historians still debate whether waking during the night increased overall resilience or simply reflected necessity. Some suggest these brief wakeful moments allowed people to check conditions and prevent disasters before they escalated. Others believe they were an unavoidable side effect of sleeping in cold environments. Either way, the rhythm worked well enough to carry people through months of darkness. Joke number two. Suddenly, broken sleep sounds less like a problem and more like a feature. You notice the faintest hint of light near the smoke hole above, not daylight yet, just a thinning of darkness. Dawn is still a long way off, but the night has begun to loosen its grip. That knowledge alone makes the cold easier to bear. Winter nights are survivable because they end. Someone near the center shifts upright briefly, checking the fire, then lies back down. No words are exchanged. Everyone understands what that movement means. All is well. Sleep can continue. You let your eyes close again, drifting back under the weight of fur and warmth. Your mind floats between waking and dreaming, thoughts slow and indistinct. Outside, the plains remain frozen and vast. Inside, life persists, breathing softly in the dark. Historians still argue whether people here measured winter in nights or in endurance, how many times they could repeat this ritual of sleeping, waking, adjusting, and sleeping again. Lying here, you suspect the answer is both. Winter is survived one night at a time, and as sleep claims you once more, deeper now, you understand something simple and powerful. Rest isn't the absence of hardship, it's the ability to recover despite it. You wake again, this time more fully, to a subtle but undeniable shift in the lodge. The air feels different, less tense, less sharp. The fire has settled into a low, steady glow, no longer fighting the cold, but simply coexisting with it. Somewhere above, beyond the hides and smoke hole, the sky has begun its slow transition from black to deep blue. Morning is on its way. A mainstream historical fact settles gently here. Waking alive, warm, and functional after a winter night was never taken for granted. Survival wasn't measured in grand victories, but in mornings like this, stiff but breathing, cold but intact, ready to move again. Winter life was sustained not by conquering the season, but by enduring it repeatedly, night after night, year after year. You shift under the furs, testing your body. Muscles are tight, joints a little reluctant, but there's no panic, no numbness, no damage. That alone feels like success. Around you, others stir slowly, stretching carefully, checking children, adjusting bedding. No one rushes. The cold hasn't vanished, and it won't be kind to haste. Here's a quirky tidbit that lingers as people wake. Some oral histories describe greeting the morning after harsh nights with quiet humor, small jokes about the wind's failure or winter's stubbornness. Historians still argue whether this reflects cultural optimism or simply a coping mechanism, but laughter, even soft laughter, appears again and again in winter accounts. Humor didn't warm bodies, but it warmed spirits enough to keep going. Joke number one, understated and earned. Winter tried. Winter did not win. You notice how quickly the lodge shifts from sleeping space to living space. Bedding is folded or stacked. Furs are shaken out to dry near the fire. The smoke hole is adjusted to let in more light. The same structure that cradled sleep now supports waking life. Nothing changes, and yet everything does. Historians still debate whether the greatest achievement of winter survival was technological or social. Was it the hide, the fire, the snow, the stones, or the shared knowledge of how to use them together? Standing, or rather, carefully sitting up, you see the answer in motion. Knowledge lives in routine, in hands that know what to do without instruction. You think back over the night, the circle against the wind, the layered hides, snow pressed gently into service, fire tended without fuss, stones holding heat, bodies pressed close, clothing never removed, infants secured, elders protected, stories told softly, storms endured, sleep taken in pieces and stitched back together. Historians still argue whether this way of life was fragile or resilient. From the outside, it looks precarious, so many small things that could go wrong. From the inside, it feels robust, layered with backups, redundancies, and care. Nothing depends on a single solution. Everything depends on many. Joke number two, final and fond. Suddenly, roughing it feels like a very disrespectful phrase. You draw a breath, slow and deep, and let the warmth of the last embers reach your face. Outside, winter waits, unchanged. Inside, people prepare to meet it again, rested enough to continue. That's the real miracle, not that winter was defeated, but that it was lived through, calmly, patiently, together. Now the pace softens, movement slow. The lodge breathes in a gentler rhythm as morning light filters faintly through the smoke hole above, pale and cool and reassuring. You don't rush to stand. No one does. Winter mornings aren't about momentum, they're about preservation. You stay where you are for a moment longer, wrapped in warmth that has done its job. The fire murmurs quietly. Furs hold their heat. Bodies nearby shift with sleepy familiarity. Outside, the vast cold world waits, but it no longer feels overwhelming. It feels manageable. It always does after a night survived. Your thoughts drift back through the layers that carried you here. Hide, snow, fire, stone, breath, belief. None of them loud, none of them dramatic. Just steady, patient defenses against a season that never compromises. This is how people endured winters long before modern walls and heaters, by understanding cold deeply, respecting it, and never facing it alone. You let your eyes close one last time, not to sleep, but to rest in that understanding. The lodge holds, the knowledge holds, the morning will come. as it always has. And as your breathing slows and your thoughts fade into something softer and quieter, you feel that calm certainty settle in. You made it through the night. Sweet dreams.